You a dyke in the box, so now listen. The way you pitching, you gon' need more than a mound visit. You sound timid and I don't kick it with round midgets that hound.
Welcome to 3-Count Commentaries. Today we're going to be talking about WWE rivals. Bret versus Shawn. Alright, so this was interesting. If you've seen the Bret versus Shawn DVD that was put out, I don't know, it had to be about 10 years ago because Jim Ross was still working there. It was a long time ago. Maybe it was 2016, 2017 or something like that. But I thought this show would kind of be like that, where Shawn and Bret would sit in a room and talk about their rivalry. But instead it was done almost in documentary style. Freddie Prinze Jr. was the host, I guess you could say, of a roundtable segment that didn't see everybody talking because Tamina was there. And Tamina didn't say a damn thing. This entire episode, I don't remember even hearing Tamina Snuka's voice throughout this entire thing. Not that I'm, that interested in what she had to say. But why was she there? She had nothing really to add. And Nash and Kofi did all the talking. But it's a pretty simple thing. They talked about the backstage rivalry, in-ring rivalry of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Now, looking at the lineup for this thing, it's like they're going to focus mostly on the in-ring rivalry of the two guys going forward, because it's going to be Undertaker and Kane. Those two guys love each other. There's no beef backstage. So it's hard to see where they were going with this. They wanted to focus on the on-screen stuff, but it kept, of course, filtering backstage, because that's what this is. Now, in the DVD that WWE put out, the WWE Rivals and Bret Shawn, they put out, it was about, they started, I think, at a really good spot. Both guys were in tag teams. Of course, Shawn being the Rockers, Bret being the Hart Foundation. The Hart Foundation was dissolved maybe a year or two before the Rockers was. So Bret was off on his own. And now in 92, or late 91, 92, Shawn is off on his own. And the older guys, the more, what they call the dinosaurs, or the bigger dudes, they're starting to be phased out. In this documentary, Kofi says, this is his favorite era, which is the beginning of the new generation era, because it started to feel like guys his size could actually start to make it in wrestling now, because Hulk Hogan is now on his way out. Now, he's not completely gone in the early part, but by 94, 95, Hogan is gone. And Shawn is on the upswing. And, Warrior's gone. But also Piper is gone. And so is Randy Savage. But the big guys are kind of passé at this point. Now we're going younger, more athletic. And they start talking about the strengths and weaknesses of both guys. Bret is a technician. His stuff looks believable. Bret believes that despite Hogan and Flair making so much money in WCW, they couldn't compare physically or athletically to what Bret and Shawn and those guys were doing in the WWF. He felt like they were doing the best stuff in the business. And Shawn says, I was a better performer. I embodied what it meant to be a sports entertainer. And I think that's kind of where our schism, especially our current day schism of wrestling versus sports entertainment, where we kind of diverge, where we have the Bret Hart camp and the Shawn Michaels camp. So Bret tells a story about, them being legitimate friends, and him inviting Shawn over to his house, and TJ Wilson, who is a friend of the Hart family, says, hey, Shawn and, Nash and those guys would come over and they would put milk in the super soakers and spray each other. And it was that sounded ridiculous because, milk in the sun. Oh boy. That had to be tough. That had to be one hell of a rib. But, they were friends. And then, Shawn starts to kind of rise up. Bret's already there. And now it's who can be number one. And Nash says it like basically Shawn had a fixation on the title, on being the top guy, being the guy. You can't have two guys who want to be the guy. And so they kind of they skip over all of the matches they had before 1996, which I think it's poor storytelling. That's the one thing about this thing I didn't like. It's like we could have talked about when, they wrestled each other for the Intercontinental Championship. They had the first ladder matches in WWE. they set some standards. They wrestled each other at Survivor Series. I believe it was 1992 or the 93. I think they wrestled each other at 92 and 93, as a matter of fact. Or was it 93 and 94? No, it wasn't 94, because that's when Shawn did the thing with Diesel. So it had to be 92 and 93. They wrestled each other. One was one-on-one match for the title. Shawn lost. The next was Shawn filling in for Jerry Lawler. He lost again, but you could see that they were working against each other a lot. And they were friendly, and Shawn was on his way up. And then we get into the Iron Man match. So the Iron Man match, which is, they gave a lot of credit. Like, I haven't seen the Iron Man match in like a decade. Like, I have not watched this full match in its entire, it's too long. Okay, it's an hour, right? It's too long for one match. It's too long. But they're like heaping like a lot of praise on the match. I think the match was very good. I know a lot of people like, they hate it now, but at the time it was mind blowing. How, the match was tremendous. And Triple H said that, it's a pretty simple story between these two guys. And, Cody, of course, is there to talk about, hey, these guys didn't slow down the longer the match went. They sped up the longer the match, which is true. They would ramp up in certain parts of the match, and then they would slow down. They would ramp up and slow down, ramp up and slow down. That's kind of how you work marathon matches anyway. And Brett says, like, hey, we were the two best guys in the world. Of course, we were in this, we could do this. We could pull this off. And it was explained, and the Rocky and wrestling connection is something that we could do a video on, because there's so much there. But TJ told the story, like, look, you look at the Iron Man match, the build up to the Iron Man match. He told the story of, like, Rocky 4, where you got Brett, he's climbing mountains. He's doing old school, grit and grime, hard scrabble training. While Shawn has, he's doing upside down push-ups, and he's got kick pads and all kind of stuff. He's doing more modern training. And modern training would be like Ivan Drago, even though Drago was on steroids and, all that kind of stuff. And Cody says, look, you're going into WrestleMania 12, either you're a Brett fan or you're a Shawn fan, but at the time you still had respect for the other one, which is true, because I was more of a Shawn fan at the time. But I loved Bret Hart. I still do. Of course, both guys were proud of the match, and they both kind of said independently of one another that they couldn't have done that match with anyone else. And then the disrespect occurs. After the match, Shawn tells Bret to get the fuck out the ring. And he tells the ref to tell Bret to get the fuck out the ring. And Bret's like, oh, wait a minute. You just disrespected me after I just, did you the favor of, putting you on and passing the torch to him. And everybody thought it was part of the storyline, especially if you follow the camera. And you see Bret is sort of selling his disappointment, selling his anger. And it fits perfectly to the finish of that match, considering you could see Bret's subtle heel turn at the end of the match, where it's still like we were teasing Bret turning heel anyway, because Bret didn't want the match to continue after the 60 minutes. He's like, okay, 60 minutes, that's it, I win, I'm the champion, it's a draw. And they said it must be a winner, and Bret like, why? And then he would slob all over his face. And then he gets back in the ring. Of course, he starts to viciously attack Shawn Michaels. That's what goes into the finish, as Bret's now kind of perturbed that this match is going to continue. And it tracks. He lost because of an extra segment that was tacked on to the match, which was a surprise that he wasn't prepared for, and that it would frustrate him. But you see Bret walking away backstage and everything, and he's real pissed. And you think it's part of the story. And then TJ Wilson and some other people are like, look, Bret didn't go to the WrestleMania after party after this. He was legit upset at, what Shawn had did in the ring. And Shawn admitted it, as he usually does. He says that, he had a bit of an attitude. And he also, noted that he shoved Earl Hebner at that point in time, because Earl Hebner couldn't get the belt on him. And Shawn just kind of pushed him away. And that was obvious to me, even as a kid, that it seemed kind of dickish. But I was kind of like, he's in the moment. He's trying to be in the moment, And he took the belt off anyway, so it didn't matter. But, so Shawn was, ass on head at this point. He's an absolute menace. So Brett says, like, look, they tried to bury the hatchet 2 or 3 times, and it just never seemed to stick. That things kept getting too tense. They wanted to maintain being friends and being professional and everything, but it wasn't quite working out. And Bruce Pritchard says, like, look, we started moving more towards reality-based wrestling. This would probably be like 96. When they started moving more, because they was complete cartoon land in 95. So right after Shawn won the belt, they were still doing some soap opera stuff with Shawn and Bulldog and, then Shawn and Mankind. But then after that, they kind of started getting a little bit more realistic. And viewing the characters as people. And Triple H says, like, Brett was a little bit more vulnerable than Shawn because Shawn was better on the microphone. And so as Brett was doing his judgmental Canadian gimmick, Shawn decided he was going to antagonize him. And in this documentary, this is probably one of my favorite lines. Shawn Michaels said, "I will say anything on TV. I have no shame." And this leads to the Sunny Days comment where he talks about that, he suggests that Bret Hart was sleeping with Sunny. And it was something that really pissed Bret off because Bret's married at this point in time. And yes, he admitted in his book that he was having affairs on his wife while he was on the road. And Shawn mentioned this too, that Bret likes to call himself a role model, but he's seen Bret on the road and he knows that Bret's no role model. This is actually what kind of set up the whole Sunny Days line. Like when people talk about the Sunny Days thing, they focus on that part. But if you take that part out of context, you really don't understand what he's talking about. He's talking about Bret in terms of having affairs on the road. And then he says, you've been having some sunny days, alluding to him having sex with Sunny. Which Bret admitted in the book. He still won't admit that the Sunny thing happened. Of course, he says it didn't happen. But he did have affairs while he was on the road. And he's talking about like, hey, look, this thing was on TV now. And his son's is old enough to really kind of recognize what's going on, and other people are bringing it up, and he's kind of embarrassed, like, okay, you've gone too far. And this, of course, what led to the infamous hair pulling incident where they got into a fight backstage, and Bret pulled out clumps of Shawn's hair, and Shawn threatened to quit. Well, he did quit, and he said he refuses to work with Bret anymore, and he threw a temper tantrum because Bret pulled his hair out. It was a completely insane story that people have told 100,000 times. Like all of this stuff has been retread a lot. And because it's been retread a lot, for them to tell the story the way they did was very bizarre. Now, the way they told the story in the documentary is that Bret's contract was coming up and that WCW offered him $2.6 million of guaranteed money. And that he was sort of unhappy with dealing with Shawn Michaels. And Vince told Bret to take the money. That's the way that they told this story. What really happened, and what, is because this story has been told 100,000 times already, very bizarre that they would tell the story this way, is that Vince signed Bret to a contract that he could not keep. Vince wasn't making enough money to honor Bret's contract. So he basically said, you probably should, renegotiate with WCW and I will give you your release so that you can go make more money. So it wasn't like his contract had come to an end. What had happened was Vince was overpaying for Bret. Or at least in his mind, he was overpaying for Bret. Bret and Shawn were having a tiff, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was that Vince just felt like he couldn't afford Bret's contract, which was a fairly new contract, if I remember correctly. I think he may have signed it maybe a year prior. So it wasn't really, because Bret was, I think, a free agent in later 96. So by the time Survivor Series, he was already under contract. Everything was good. But Vince was trying to get Bret to renegotiate with Bischoff for more money. And he was going to, they were still, that part at least was true. But this whole thing, like Bret was about to become a free agent anyway, is like, no, that wasn't the case. Now, Bret and Vince had negotiated this deal with Bischoff. So Bret was indeed leaving, and everybody pretty much knew that. But then the issue became, Brett is still the champion. And now Brett is refusing to work with Shawn at Survivor Series 97. Now, the way Brett tells the story is that he went up to Shawn and said, hey, I heard we were working together at Survivor Series. Whatever the finish, I'm going to be glad to work with you, whatever. Because people believed that Shawn was probably going to go over as a way because Brett was leaving. And Shawn said, hey, thank you. This is what Brett said, Shawn said. Thank you, but I wouldn't do the same for you. Now, I've heard this part of the story in a different way because I heard that part of the story in context of Shawn not wanting to work with Brett at WrestleMania 13. In so much that it was supposed to be a rematch, Brett and Shawn at WrestleMania 13. But Shawn gave him the old, the okie doke with the knee injury. And they skipped over that. The whole Shawn faking a knee injury, even though I don't think it was fake. It wasn't completely fake, let's put it like that. But he bullshitted a knee injury to get out of the match. Lost his smile, gave up the title in early 97. This led to Undertaker and Sid, Brett, and Austin. Well, it was supposed to have been Shawn and Brett at WrestleMania. And it ended up not happening because Shawn said he had injured his knee. So they skipped over that part, which I don't see why they would skip that over. Because that's when I've always known for Shawn to say to Brett, I wouldn't do for you what you did for me. But I'm guessing it was here at Survivor Series, however that goes. So Brett is pissed. Now he doesn't want to work with Shawn. And the plan, of course, is for Shawn to walk out as the champion. And now Brett is refusing to do the job in Canada. And then he's also refusing to do the job to Shawn. And he's promising he's not going to throw the belt in the garbage. And Bischoff has stepped in at one point and said, oh, we were never going to do that again. We got a cease and desist the last time we did it. We weren't going to do it again. And of course, you can't really trust him. But Brett's being a dickhead because he won't do the job. Shawn is an arrogant asshole. He's making you talking to Brett more difficult. Because how can you convince Brett to do the job if Shawn is an asshole? It's just, it ain't going to work, right? So they have the big meeting where Shawn is meeting with Vince, and a bunch of people have put themselves in this meeting. I think Cornette said he was there. I think Vince Russo said he was there. There were some people. Cornette, of course, takes credit for planting the seed for the screw job. Vince Russo suggested that he did it. Triple H has suggested that he said it. There's a bunch of people who claim they were in on this meeting, and a bunch of them have said that it was their idea to fuck Brett out of the championship at this point in time. The honest truth is, Vince had done this before with Wendy Richter and the Fabulous Moolah. He had already done screw jobs before, so he knew how to get the fucking belt off Brett if he wanted to. The problem was just to get Brett in a position where it could happen. And so they came up with this idea that they were going to fuck Brett in this way. So we go through the Montreal screw job, which, we've talked about 100 times. Shawn says that not only did he have no recollection of ever saying to Brett that I would never do for you what you did for me, which means doing the job, passing the torch or whatever. Not only have no recollection of that, he doesn't have much of a recollection of Montreal either. He just says he did what he wanted. He did what he was told to do, and then he bolted. That was it. And then he admitted that he lied to Brett on camera about not knowing that this was going to happen. That was pretty much the extent of Shawn Michaels in Montreal. Undertaker was in the meeting where Vince got beat up. Shawn was there. And Undertaker says, basically Shawn was trying to smooth things over as Brett and Vince were arguing. So he basically says, he had to squeeze his leg a little bit, pipe down. Let them hash this out. You stay out of it, And then we tell the story of, Vince getting punched in the face. And Brett tells a new wrinkle to the story that it wasn't just him marching into the locker room attacking Vince. That what it was Vince was approaching him, and he approached Vince, and he said it was an accepted fight. It was a duel to the death. It was like a duel to the death. And Everything about this is hilarious to me. So Cody he appears again, and he talks about, like, hey, if you're a fan of Brett, Shawn Michaels is a piece of shit, from this point forward, of course, from Montreal forward, and this remains true to this day. You can't talk about Brett, and whenever somebody talking about Brett, Shawn Michaels manages to trend on Twitter for some reason. I don't understand it. He's like always trending on Twitter. Anyway, they skipped a lot. They skipped all of WCW, Bret Hart's WCW stuff, but they did mention that at one point the WWF and WCW were in the same city, and Bret stayed in his hotel room so he wouldn't run into Shawn Michaels, because he felt like he would actually attack him and kill him with his bare hands if he came across him. I was like, wow, he took it so personally. But it was great, and of course it became part of Bret Hart's personal narrative, even in WCW, that they kept talking about, him being screwed and all that stuff. And so they tied up the story in a neat little bow by saying both of these guys' careers ended off of in-ring injuries. Shawn broke his back in the casket match with Undertaker. Bill Goldberg booted Bret Hart in the head. And, they didn't speak to each other for over 10 years. And TJ Wilson, who was, trying to become a WWE superstar, this was in 2007, 2008 or something like that, says that he wanted to open the door for their reunion because Shawn had expressed some desire to bury the hatchet and wanted things to move on. Bret had a stroke about this time, and he had done, I don't think he had done the Hall of Fame in 2006, so this was after that. He still wasn't comfortable participating in the Hall of Fame and all that stuff, but he was interested in having a phone conversation with Shawn Michaels. So he tells TJ, give Shawn his phone number, and if he calls him, he'll know that he really wants to bury the hatchet. Then he says several weeks went by, Shawn still didn't call him. And that's when they decided, all right, let's try this thing face to face. TJ Wilson said, look, Shawn is too anxious. Shawn has admitted, I don't know what to say, what to do, whatever. And they decided to do it in person. So now it's put together that it's going to happen on Monday Night Raw, that Shawn and Bret are going to bury the hatchet. And this part was my favorite part, one of my two favorite parts of the documentary. We get the actual footage in catering where Shawn comes through catering and shakes hands with Bret. Like, that's the first time they had seen each other in like 12 years. They hadn't seen each other since 1997. And, Shawn comes over and shakes Bret's hand. And this looks like, it was in 2009 or something like that. And they shook hands there first. And they talked a little bit, but they said, we'll save whatever we really need to save for the ring. And of course, they go to the ring. They do the big handshake segment, the hug segment, and basically buried the hatchet. And Shawn said he really kind of apologized to Bret in the ring during the hug that, of really what happened. And we get some footage, and this was my favorite stuff. This was my favorite part. April of 2022, Bret and Shawn are just like, they're in a hotel or something like that. And it's just standing around talking about, being grandparents and stuff like that. And they're just laughing together, and they're reminiscing on the Iron Man match and how much they enjoyed it. And, they're not best friends anymore, like they used to be. But, Shawn says Bret reaches out for the big events, birthdays, anniversaries, stuff like that. And they may even hang out during that time. And you're like, wow, that's really cool shit. Like, I don't understand how Undertaker and Kane or Cena and Edge are going to have the same rocky road that, because this had legitimate backstage heat and legitimate on camera heat, but they hadn't had a match since 1997, But yes, we can say WWE continuously rehashes the same stories again and again, because we could talk about Montreal Screwjob. They've done numerous documentaries on that, numerous TV shows about that. They basically turning all this stuff into, chicken. You bake chicken, you fry chicken, you steam chicken. That's what they're doing. They basically got this story, this Montreal Screwjob story. They're going to steam it, they're going to fry it, they're going to bake it, they're going to do whatever. They're going to keep reselling this fucking story. But they keep adding new interesting things to it, which makes it must see for people who are interested in the story. So if you want to do like a definitive version of the Montreal Screwjob, it's being possible because they keep redoing it with different perspectives, different people who are in the room, different people who are doing different things. Now the big footage that's coming out of this thing is the catering footage of Sean and Brett, which, nobody had seen before. And so it was new and it was fun. And I liked the episode, but I don't know the direction of this brand now, because everything else that I saw is seemingly nothing but on-screen stuff. Talking about, I guess, the characters of Cena and Edge, or Rey Mysterio and Eddie Guerrero, or whatever. Because most of them are friends from this point forward. These were the two guys who were friends, and then they became enemies, and then they became friends again, which is a nice little rocky road. I just wish they would have talked more about their early years. I'm talking like them wrestling at tag teams against each other. Like the Rockers and the Hart Foundation had some good tag team matches against each other. I would have liked for them to talk about the Intercontinental Championship when they wrestled for that against each other. When Brett was first became the world champion and they was wrestling for that against each other. That would have been fun. That would have been, I felt, more of a complete story. That you saw these guys when they were young guys. Sean was very young at this point. And they were in tags together. Then they were in the mid-card together. Then they were in the main event together. Now they're legends in the ring, 2009, Barry and the Hatchet together. That's great. To me, that's fantastic. So I like the episode. Even though, we kind of know all this stuff already. There's nothing really new that's spinning out of it. You could probably find a clip of the whole them being backstage thing. That was great to me. But I want to close on this. When are we finally going to get Bret the Hitman Hart in the ring with Bill Goldberg so that they can shake hands and end their now 2-decade-long feud? Can we end the Goldberg Hitman feud in the middle of episode of Raw? What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe. I'll talk to you guys later, man. Peace out.
Threat to academia, slacking you defeated, brother. Track I hack and eat it up. I'm heating up, hot as my mama stove on a Sunday.